Good afternoon and welcome to this regular meeting of the City of Eureka Community Oversight on Police Practices Board. I, Dino Novello, will be facilitating this meeting. I would like to start out by reading our land acknowledgement. The land that Eureka rests on is known in the Wiyot language as Jirojiji. Past actions by local, state, and federal governments remove the Wiyot and other indigenous peoples from the land and threaten to destroy their cultural practices. The City of Eureka acknowledges the Wiyot community, their elders, both past and present, as well as future generations. This acknowledgement demonstrates the city's commitment to dismantle the ongoing legacies of settler colonialism. We'll begin our meeting with Executive Assistant Shannon Fazio, who will do roll call.
Board Chair Dino Novello.
Present.
Board Member Raul Torres.
Present.
Board Member Lawrence Giventer.
Present.
Board Member Mark Pardoe.
Present.
Board Member Melinda Cherubellini.
Present.
Board Member James Ladica.
Present.
Thank you. I would also like to introduce our staff that we have in attendance. We have Chief Brian Stevens. We have City Manager Miles Slattery, and HR Director Will Folger. And online we have Independent Police Auditor Teresa Magula. Okay. Oh, and Teresa.
And Julie Rulin.
And Julie. And I also would like to acknowledge that Independent Auditor Police Auditor Julie Rulin is also in attendance. So please rise with me as we say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The next item on our agenda is approval of minutes. I'm hoping everyone has had the opportunity to review the minutes from our last meeting. Are there any changes that need to be made to the meeting minutes? My only recommendation is to change the above title from Citizens to Community Oversight on Police Practices. Other than that, any other changes?
Chair, I move to approve the minutes.
I have a first. Do I have a second? Okay, we have a first and a second. So all those in favor to approve the minutes, please show your approval by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those oppose? Any who abstain? Oh, okay.
Unanimous yes vote, motion carries.
Thank you. This is a time for members of the public can comment on items not listed on the agenda. Each speaker is limited to 3 minutes. Such time allotment or portion thereof shall not be transferred to other speakers. The public will be allowed to speak concurrently with the calling of an agenda item following the staff presentation of that time. Pursuant to the Brown Act, the COPP may not take action an item that does not appear on the agenda. Do I have anybody here in council who would like to speak?
Good afternoon, members of the committee. I'm Steve Madrone, your 5th District Supervisor for Humboldt County. I'm here as an individual, and I wanted to thank you for the work you're doing here in the city of Eureka. We had a discussion that we started up today in response to our grand jury's report, and we're going to be talking about this issue further down the road as to what we might do at the county end of things. So I applaud you for your work, and I'm here to learn and listen. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have anybody else in chamber who would like to speak on non-agenda items? Seeing none, do I have anybody online that would like to speak on non-agenda items?
Natalie?
Hello, everyone. I'm Natalie Arroyo. I'm the 4th District County Supervisor. And like Steve, my colleague, I came today to have the opportunity to hear some of what you've been up to and hear your reports. And I appreciate the invitation of one of your members to our board to listen in and learn about how you function. So thanks.
Thank you for coming. Anybody else who's online on non-agenda item that would like to speak?
Is there anyone else on Zoom who would like to speak? Please raise your hand.
It looks like Janelle
Okay.
just changed.
Janelle?
Yes, thank you. I'm not real good at this. Didn't know how to raise my hand. I'm here actually just to watch also and listen. Just watch and listen to see. It seems that there's a different makeup, and we'll see what happens. Thanks.
Thanks, Janelle. Do we have anybody else?
I see no one else.
Okay, thank you. The next item on our agenda is Vice Chairman for COPP Board, recommendation for Vice Chair. In our last meeting, I went from Vice Chair to Chair, so thank you for that nomination. So now that with me as Chair, that leaves a vacant position as a Vice Chair. So per our bylaws, in the absence of a is there anybody who is on this board that would like to nominate someone to be Vice Chair of this committee?
Chair, I'd like to nominate Dr. Pardoe as Vice Chair.
Do I have any other nominations for anybody else? I will entertain a motion to nominate Board Member Pardoe as Vice Chair.
I move that we nominate Dr. Pardoe as Vice Chair of our committee.
We have and I have Board Member Giventer second. Okay. So all those in favor to have a Board Member Pardoe as Vice Chair, show your approval by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody oppose? Congratulations, Dr. Pardoe.
Thank you. I appreciate the nomination, and I will accept that nomination. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is the OIR quarterly review of EPD recommendations received report. So this is a standing report that we have on our agenda. So in our audience through Zoom, we have independent police auditor Julie Rulin and Teresa Magula. Can any of you would like to provide us a general summary of the report that you provided?
Yeah, absolutely. And congratulations on your new position, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
I'm Teresa Magula. I'm joined by my colleague, Julie Rulin. We have a number of items on the agenda today. The first, as you mentioned, is our quarterly report, which we present to your board with every meeting. The quarterly report covers the complaint cases that were closed in the past quarter. And so those are complaints that were received either from members of the public or that were initiated by the department internally. In this quarter, we have 2 of those cases. What we've done in the past is provided a summary of each case and then allowed some time for questions and answers should any board members have those. And so I'd like to follow that process today if that is what the chair would like.
Please do. Thank you.
Excellent. So the first case in our quarterly report, and again, these are cases that were closed in the last quarter, which means that the investigation was completed, and we reviewed it in the course of this quarter. The first case is number 2306. That means it occurred in 2023. The summary of this case is that the complainant alleged discourtesy and inaccurate report writing. In the course of their investigation, EPD found those 2 allegations to be unfounded. During the investigation, EPD also discovered that an officer had failed to activate body-worn camera and sustained that allegation based on violation of body-worn camera policy. We reviewed that investigation. We thought the findings were thorough, fair, and complete, and that the investigation was also thorough, fair, and complete. Are there any questions related to this particular case?
Do we have any questions for our independent auditor?
This is
Go ahead.
Yes,
Board Member Latica.
thank you. In the summary of this investigation, you noted that the secondary officer hadn't activated his body-worn camera, and my question is there, in the course of your investigation, did you find evidence of other instances of this officer not activating their body-worn camera? Or is that within your scope of things you look at?
Yeah, so the department, in the course of their own internal review, I believe did take a look at the officer's history of any previous allegations related to body-worn camera activation and did not find any. That does not mean that the department, did a total investigation or audit of that particular officer's use of body-worn camera, but this particular issue had not been raised for this officer in the past.
Thank you. Is that something that's typically tracked by departments, like the number of incidents of individual officers not activating their cameras?
Yeah, some departments will conduct some form of tracking of body-worn camera. There are some that do more robust audits on a regular basis to ensure that incidents that should have body-worn camera activation actually do have that video that is related to the incident. And that's something that the department might consider going forward.
In your professional opinion, would you consider that a best practice for police departments?
I think activation, of course, is of paramount importance, and that it's something that should be audited on a regular basis by supervisors. Chief Stevens might be available to speak to what the department is currently doing along that avenue.
Another follow-up question on this one. You mentioned that you've made extensive efforts to locate the witness. It seems like that they weren't successful. Is that accurate?
That's right. They actually did locate the witness. One of the eyewitnesses was located and interviewed. And so it was difficult to find that person at first. And the investigator, if I'm remembering correctly, even went to the individual's last known address and so on to try to find that person, be able to get their statement.
So then they confirmed that they had shared their version of events with the secondary officer?
Correct. That's right.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have any other question? Board Member Torres.
Hi there. I'm just curious if there's an expectation on your part. Like when I read this, I'm wondering, they said the other officer didn't turn on his camera. Is there an expectation that you're going to get a response to say something like, because we found that should have happened, but it didn't happen. We had a conversation with them. We had a meeting, or there was something, because I don't read that. I just read that should have happened, but then overall, there's not a case here, right? And so I'm just curious if there's an expectation that they would say, we did find some issues that should have been corrected, so here's what we did, right? Like whether it was disciplinary, non-disciplinary, just like, so that you feel like it was discussed. It was like we had a talk that, this shouldn't happen again, right? Just, it seems like we're not completing the loop here. And I guess I'm a supervisor, so I look at it from a supervisory point of view. Like at minimum, I'm going to have a conversation about what happened and be clear about either retrain or something. And I don't read that here. So I'm curious if that's something that you're expecting to get or not in these reports.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Member Torres. And part of the challenge with this type of transparency and reporting is that we want to be careful and mindful of an officer's rights in their personnel file. And so the allegation related to the body-worn camera not being activated was sustained, and the department took the appropriate disciplinary action. And that is something that we do not put in our public reports because we want out of mindfulness for the particular officer's rights in their personnel file. And it's something that we do take a look at, and as you know, that the outcome we found to be appropriate, including whatever disciplinary action the department took related to each sustained allegation.
Thank you.
Anybody else? My question, I have a question, is on the second paragraph, there's an implication that just by reading it says, for a traffic collision because the other involved party was white, that the officers were was discourteous. And my question is, during the investigation process, did you find any allegations of racial profiling in this case?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Novello. That's an excellent question. It's something that we discussed. As you might recall, we are actively involved with the investigation and the way that the allegations are framed from the onset. And so the department shared this particular complaint with us initially. We did a real careful read and really understood that the racial bias component was not part of the complaint, that truly the complainant was concerned about the discourtesy. But certainly we had conversations around whether this might be raised to the level of being a racial bias allegation. Ultimately, we determined based on what the complainant had actually stated that she was concerned about both initially and in the interview, that the racial bias was not the component that was of concern here.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other questions regarding this case? No? Okay. I think we're ready to move on to case number 2311.
All right, so in case 2311, again, we have a complaint of discourtesy from a member of the public. EPD conducted another extensive investigation, and I really do in this case mean extensive. They reached out to almost everybody that they could locate that was available that day, and they determined that the allegation could not be proven or disproven. That is referred to as a not sustained, so it means that there was insufficient evidence on either side. We found that the investigation was very fair and complete, and we acknowledge that finding something to be not sustained is kind of notoriously unsatisfactory, right? It's difficult to have these types of very extensive investigations look at the whole of the evidence and come out with, well, we can't really tell one way or the other. We can't prove or disprove it. And so we do acknowledge that that leaves one feeling unsatisfied. But truly, we found that that was the best finding that EPD could have determined in this case, given the evidence.
Okay. Do you have any questions from the board regarding this case? Go ahead, Board Member Giventer.
Again, there's a mention of lack of activation of the body-worn camera, so I just wanted to reinforce the earlier question from James regarding the necessity and the reminder of to activate body-worn cameras. But I particularly want to draw our attention to the very last paragraph of this report. This is very important. In the heat of the moment, when there is a verbal interaction, people can't have difficulty self-reflecting on what they're saying, and often have difficulty in hearing and understanding what the other person is saying. But in this case, another officer came on the scene and attempted to calm the situation. That is exactly the proper behavior. And the report compliments that officer, and I just wanted to reinforce the importance of that and the kudos that have been that are properly conveyed to that officer.
Thank you. Do you have any other questions? Yes, Board Member Pardoe.
Yes, I want to second what Board Member Giventer said about the intervention. I think a lot of the reason we are here today is because of the lack of intervention by police officers. And so I think this reflects positively on the department, that we have a department where the officers are willing to intervene in a situation that could really turn into a much worse situation. So I agree with Board Member Giventer. I think that that's something that should be commended, and certainly we want to see that from our police officers, is intervening when, and we see that in medicine a lot. In medicine, certainly in the OR and Board Member Ladika can agree, is that in medicine there was a lot of reluctance to speak up for a long time if they saw something going wrong, and we're really trying to push and change that so that people do intervene when it's obvious that what's happening is not going well. And so I'm glad to see that and glad that you acknowledge it. So thank you, Teresa, for pointing that out.
Thank you. Do you have any other comments or questions? Okay, Board Member Chair Bellini.
Close enough.
Sorry. I'll butcher it again.
Yeah, I just thank you. I just want to make a comment on a comment you made in your conclusion that I thought was interesting, that you point out the department is actually processing higher volume of complaints. And one might jump to the conclusion is, oh, what's going on? There's more and more people out there complaining than ever. But you point out that it's more of an indication of its willingness to formally document and investigate issues that might previously have not been documented, maybe verbally discussed, and we've talked about that before. When do you issue a verbal reprimand? When do you document? When does it become an actual complaint? And you commend the department for that forward-thinking and approach to that. So I just wanted to make a point of that. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments regarding this case?
I feel
Yes,
compelled
Board
to
Member
piggyback.
Ladika.
Thank you. I feel compelled to piggyback on both of those and just say, the fact that another officer intervened, that can save, when cooler heads prevail, that can save another officer from discipline or worse. Can increase the enhance the interactions with the public, and it just really stood out in my mind too. I wanted to highlight that they stepped up and did the right thing and probably prevented it from becoming more of an issue. And yeah, the fact that the public feels free to report these incidents, and then the department follows up on them, it's really a beautiful thing. So I'm happy to be a part of this process, and it's fills my heart. Thank you.
And thank you for being part of the process as well. Any other questions or comments? I see none. Do we have any questions from, or any public comments from here from the chamber regarding these two cases? Don't see any. Do we have any online?
I see none.
Okay. So thank you. All right. So the next item on our agenda is the OIR group review of the incident at Cal Poly Humboldt. And so for this, so we're going to review the Cal Poly protest incident. And again, I just would like to remind everyone that we're here to review the response from Eureka Police Department. So I'm going to start out by letting Chief Stevens an opportunity to tell us how EPD responded to the incident.
Good afternoon, everyone. Derek, can you turn on the PowerPoint? He's back. Okay, following the April 22nd protest incident at Cal Poly, Humboldt, a member of City Council, requested that the IPA do a review of our response to this incident from the standpoint of the Eureka Police Department, how we responded and what we did as a part of the operation on scene. The IPA, through the city manager, the request was made. I provided the IPA with all the written reports from our agency that day that we took, all the videos, body camera videos, and also made a request through Cal Poly Humboldt for any exterior cameras they may have had that may have caught a different view of the incident as it began to take place. We also pulled many videos off of online from social media sites that we were able to use that had a different perspective. These were all provided to the IPA, and the IPA will follow up after this short presentation with their findings of the review. I do want to just lay the foundation with this presentation of how this all began. Maybe. Oh, let me turn it on. Let me turn it on first, boss. There we go. One thing at a time. So this all started on April 22nd, 2024 at about 5:30 p.m. I received a request through my agency for an assist to go to Cal Poly Humboldt to deal with a small group, approximately 40 people, I believe it was, that had entered into Siemens Hall, and they wanted to go in and make arrests and remove those individuals from inside campus property. I then contacted the former chief of Cal Poly to confirm his request and exactly what he was asking for, and was able to, because it fell at the time we were getting ready to switch watches. I had more personnel in the city at that time. I was able to send a sergeant and 4 officers to Siemens Hall to Cal Poly to help. This also allowed us to keep the staffing level we could inside the city to maintain proper policing of the city. Why do we go? Well, this was a mutual aid request, like I said, from the former police chief of Cal Poly Humboldt. Mutual aid requests are something that happen in a small county with rural agencies all the time. They happen daily pretty much like today with the incident up in Neelan. I mean, there's assist that comes out and people go to help do whatever they need to do. We've had one in the past, or a large one with the Sarah Bareilles concert, just so as an example, that mutual aid request went all the way out to Mendocino County for assistance, and that's just kind of what we do up here, and it's how we get things done with the number of people that we have. The where, obviously, was in Siemens Hall, Cal Poly campus. My directive, so after I gave the direction to send a sergeant and 4, I called the sergeant directly on his way up there. I advised him that to provide whatever assistance he could, as long as it was within law and policy, to assist Cal Poly Humboldt with their issue. I asked him to watch over our personnel and to stay together as a team and to phone me immediately if they needed any assistance. I don't know exactly how long it was, but it wasn't very long after that. A Code 30 countywide request for additional assistance came out. So a Code 30 request is any available officer, deputy, anyone that can, law enforcement profession, to respond to a designated area, Code 3 lights and sirens, to assist an agency that's having an issue, and they're requesting that immediate assist. In the past, a lot of these have been officer-involved shootings, major traffic accidents we had in the city in a pursuit with an officer who was injured, or could have been an officer being shot like in Arcata several years ago. I was notified of the request. I sent additional resources that I had available at the time while still being able to maintain our ability to police the city. I responded at that time from my residence to the scene, and I phoned and spoke to the sergeant that was on scene, and he pretty much just told me things have gotten bad and we need assistance immediately. The additional resources I was able to pull, I requested a recall of all available officers and instructed them on where to respond to and what gear to bring. A request was also made for additional gear to be brought to the scene from our headquarters by personnel that were on duty. I contacted one of my commanders who was in town and requested he also respond to Cal Poly with me. In all, at the end of the night, we had 20 personnel from EPD on scene. Our primary goal upon arrival changed from what they wanted, the arrest aspect of this, to more or less stabilization of the scene. We started working on scene management, officer safety, clear communication, and identifying mission objectives became our priority. While these tasks were happening, officers were working to stabilize the scene and prepare various contingency plans for anything that may happen so that we and our personnel could respond appropriately. We then made a decision to vacate the property. So once efforts by Cal Poly administration to peacefully negotiate persons out of the hall were unsuccessful, and dealing with a large group of demonstrators onlookers on the outside, outnumbered officers about 10 to 1, agency heads that were on scene worked together to create an exit strategy and vacate the area, giving up the ground in the building to the demonstrators. At this point, there was no clear objectives that could have been safely carried out given the circumstances we were facing and the number of personnel we had available on scene at that time. A conversation was had with someone we identified as the leader of the demonstration outside the hall, and a request was made to allow the officers to safely exit the area. This was safely accomplished, and they did assist us with that. That was important, right? We didn't want to make this plan to leave and then have a demonstrator somewhere act out, do something that would incite us to have to respond, and then we'd be right back to square one. So by gaining their cooperation and our exit made us safer for all of us that evening. I'm going to show some photos and videos now of what led up to us being involved in the confrontations that we were in, the force that was used, and then us backing out of Siemens Hall. So about 7:10, officers on scene were assigned to remove a barricade that had been built by protesters. The team assembled in Siemens Hall to do that. This is a video from Redheaded Black Belt. It was taken from inside and provided to them. This is when it's changed from a demonstration to arrest to now we had felony acts of assault happening on peace officers. You will see in this video multiple cans of food being thrown. Full cans of food being thrown. One will break just above the door frame. Others you'll see bounce off shields or off the deputies and officers that are on scene. Derek, can you play the video, please? EPD officers that responded to that initial response took their riot control gear with them. That's why they're wearing helmets. That's why we had our shields with us. We took the appropriate level of gear with us for their protection, and that's when they were asked to move up, and IPA will talk about that more in their review. Can you play this video, please, Derek? So this is, again, a video from someone inside the demonstration. So during that video, what you don't see is what you're going to see in this video. Officer Clark is one of our officers. She was up front. She immediately gets pinned behind a piece of a desk, a large board that's behind her knees. And now that crowd pushed forward, and she immediately goes down. Her helmet is now choking her, and it takes, like it said in the slide, about 3 minutes for them to get her up off the ground. So when you see that surge of officers push forward, you see the strikes that are thrown. That is all because they are trying to get her up off the ground. The tall deputy from the sheriff's department is a sergeant. He had her by the vest. You'll see it. He's got his hand under her vest trying to keep her from going all the way to the ground. So I just want to bring to the attention that perspective of videos is very confusing, right? It doesn't lead you to believe or see actually what is being seen by everybody. And you can only play one side, and you can think that, wow, that didn't look good. But if you know the reason why they're doing it and see the other side, that changes the perspective of what the officers were doing that day, and that's what this video will show you here. Derek, please.
Jamie, you're good. Jamie, get up. Get Jamie up. I got you. Can't see. Get your feet up, Jamie. Clark, you good? Hey, we need a code 30. Pulling one out. Yeah, hands it off. trying to get my baton.
So you can see it's a little bit different perception when you can see what's actually going on from the officer's viewpoint, and then you have the officer being trapped and then trying to get her up off the ground. During the incident, 3 officers suffered injuries, none of them severe, but definitely extensive. The supervisor took a can, at least 1 can of sardines to the leg, and he was not even on the front lines. He was out like past the front doors supervising. Another officer took quite the beating to the legs. And then 1 took some injuries to his hand and arms. So what was the next steps for EPD following this? In the days following the April 22nd incident, we prepared for additional protests and demonstrations throughout the region. The April 30th operation at Cal Poly, our role in that was not to be involved in the operation on campus. There were plenty of allied agencies and other mutual aid requests went out. There were agencies that came in from the Bay Area and others to assist with that. Our role that day was to be a contingency with the reaction teams that could respond to any other place in the county in the event that they decided to move from Cal Poly to downtown Arcata to start protesting and have problems. Because our resources were stretched so thin, we kept everybody in the city and we're just available to respond. We also expected the fact that there would probably be arrests occurring after the operation began, and therefore we believed that we'd have protests at the jail. That's in our jurisdiction. We're responsible for that, so I wanted to make sure we had a contingency here to deal with that. Following that, Cal Poly Humboldt made the decision to have commencements off of campus because campus was still closed. 2 of those locations happened to fall within the city of Eureka, the Eureka High School and the Eureka Theater. So our role for the commencement is we didn't play a role directly in the site security. However, we did run the overall operations plans. We had 2 reaction teams that worked out of EPD headquarters that conducted 30-minute patrol checks of the venues and the courthouse, because at the courthouse was a non-ceremony memorial celebration that was taking place at the same time these graduations were going on. All the events were successful and required no additional police response from the react teams, and actually we got quite a few positive comments from families and those that came in. They actually liked the shorter ceremonies in a more private setting, but having everyone separated for us made it easier, and I was happy that we were able to give the commencement to the students and do it in a peaceful, safe manner so they could have that. I want to thank all the agencies that were on scene and responded to assist that day, and I know Cal Poly's new chief, Greg Allen, is here, and I know we have plans in the future. We have meetings coming up that the IPA will talk about. But also, I just want to thank the Humboldt County Sheriff's Department, especially the personnel that were up front with EPD at the time that the conflict happened. They were instrumental in getting our officer unpinned and ensuring the safety of everyone that was up there. We work hard in Humboldt County as law enforcement leaders to work together and to have that positive working relationship with one another. And when we do have to call upon each other, then we try to do what we can to lend a hand and make sure that everybody gets home safe and we can accomplish our mission. And this is exactly what happened at Cal Poly that day. People showed up, agencies stepped up, EPD stepped up and rose to that challenge with professional and balanced demeanor. And we were able to get all the officers out of there safe that night. And with time and tactics comes positive outcomes, and that's what April 30th was for. And it was resolved. So the last thing before I turn it over to the IPA, I just want to say is I don't take my job lightly at all. I've understood for years, from the time I was a supervisor, from the time I worked at the task force and was in charge of large-scale SWAT operations and drug task force, search warrants, that I was always going to be the first one through the door because I don't want nobody to get hurt on my watch. And becoming a supervisor, definitely becoming a chief, I have almost 70 people whose lives fall on my balance every single day. They all join this profession knowing what the dangers are. They know they're going to be asked to do things. And in fact, they could wake up and walk out to their car and that'd be the last day they ever step foot on earth. And we don't know that, but that's the profession. And I don't take making decisions like this lightly to do mutual aid, to send my people into places or ask them to do things that put them in a higher level of danger, but understand that I do it because it's what we do. It's what law enforcement does. I weigh those risks, and I'll do it again tomorrow if they call me, because that's the right thing to do. And my people know that, our people know that, and they'll respond in a professional manner and take care of whatever the mission is that day. So just understand, I lose sleep over this stuff. I was mad I wasn't there, still angry that I wasn't there in the beginning. I'm glad I was able to show up and help and resolve the situation the best we could and get all our people out of there. But I don't put people's lives in danger for reckless decisions or missions. So, and on that, I'll turn it over to Teresa and the IPA.
I'm gonna wait for questions until after the independent auditor provides her their report. So, so hold on to your questions. So, independent police auditor Teresa Magula, would this is your opportunity to share?
Yeah. Hello. Hello, everyone. I'm Julie Rulin. I am also a member of the IPA team. I'm going to kick us off here and then turn it back to Teresa. But first, I wanted to thank Chief Stevens for that presentation and for his comments and for his role here. I also wanted to acknowledge the chief and his leadership team for their cooperation with our review and providing us all of the materials we needed, all of the video. I'm happy that they were able to show some of that video today, because I think it really was very beneficial to get that look at the body worn camera. But I just wanted to acknowledge their cooperation and assistance with us in doing the review that we've done. The city leadership asked that we review EPD's role in that law enforcement response on the Cal Poly campus from April 22nd. Specifically, there was a specific desire that we focus on the use of force at Siemens Hall. That was really the focus of that video that you saw. And besides that being within our regular scope as IPA and reviewing critical incidents, we also have a wealth of very recent relevant experience looking at crowd management and protest response by law enforcement. As you all will remember, during the summer of 2020, there were widespread protests around the country in response to the murder of George Floyd. And a number of those went kind of sideways. There were some unique complicating factors in those scenarios, and significant discord between communities and the law enforcement agencies who were responding to those protests.
Is Teresa, are you able to
Did Julie
help
freeze up there? Yeah. All right, I wasn't sure if it was me or if it was Julie. Yeah, I can take over until Julie gets back online. As Julie was saying, we have experience in evaluating some of these responses. In particular, some of the protest activity in 2020 occurred in jurisdictions where we already had contracts with the cities to review their police departments. Others were the result of agencies reaching out to us in specific so that we would conduct independent reviews. And so we did so for, I believe, 6 different jurisdictions, and our reports are all linked in the report that we submitted to the board today. So you can refer to those should you have questions about kind of the larger complexities of crowd management and of First Amendment assembly. In this particular case, as Julie was articulating, she's back. Julie, I went over what we've done so far. Take it away.
I have no idea what happened. I just started to get a little circular thing on my computer, so I'm not sure where I left off. And I don't know where Teresa picked us up there.
Yeah, I was just saying what we've done in the past related to crowd management. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I will let it go at that. I wanted to just go back and just sort of say what we did here. We looked at all of the videos, those that were made public, some of which you saw today, but also many, many hours of additional body-worn camera footage, other surveillance footage that we received from the department. We reviewed all of the written reports, and we had some detailed conversations with Chief Stevens to better understand the sequence of events and EPD's response. Chief Stevens gave a good summary of the incident. That video tells the story pretty well, and I think in an important way to show sort of both sides of it and the different perspectives on that one sort of clash right there at the entrance to Siemens Hall. Our report provides a very detailed factual statement based on all the video and reports that we reviewed. Just to boil it down for purposes of this presentation, in real short summary form, responding EPD officers and the sergeant walked into a situation that was very different from the one they expected, based on the initial request that came out and the information that they'd received. It was a situation that didn't really have a concrete plan or a very clear objective, and really little or no chance to find what we might consider to be a successful resolution. And yet they didn't, while I think officers kind of recognized that, they didn't really have the authority to change it based on the standard rules governing mutual aid responses, which the chief talked about a little bit, and Teresa will talk more about in just a few minutes. Once officers started engaging with the protesters there at Siemens Hall, they were quickly overwhelmed. And then they found themselves in a spot where, in our view and our findings, the use of force was necessary in order to safely pull back and disengage from that situation. All in all, we found that the EPD response aligned with best practices around both crowd management and the use of force. And our report tackles this in 4 main sections. One, just discusses the basic principles of crowd management and force in those scenarios. The command and control issues that came up on April 22nd, issues surrounding mutual aid and the response, sort of the regional responses, and when a agency is called on to assist their partners. And then the last section deals with EPD's after action efforts, and the chief talked about that a little bit, but really it's kind of where we see we just really focus a lot of our efforts looking at those after action events. How does an agency learn internally from an experience like this? And then what is EPD doing to collaborate with their county partners to improve future responses? We saw that, in the days and weeks after April 22nd, the ways in which already they were learning and improving responses with increased planning and all of that. And again, Teresa can talk more about that. I was just tasked with sort of laying it all out, and now she's going to drill into some of the details. And then we will be happy to take any of your questions and help, clear up any areas that you still are curious about. Take it away, Teresa.
Yeah, thanks, Julie. And thank you, Chief Stevens, for setting the stage and for the department's willingness to share body-worn camera footage publicly that had not been previously seen. Julie mentioned that our report covers kind of 4 main areas, and I'll dig a little deeper into each of them. The first is the idea of crowd management and the use of force in the crowd management context kind of generally. And I'll say right at the start, it's no surprise to anyone, crowd management is complicated, right? As any crowd might show, this particular crowd had a diversity of behaviors. There was a diversity of intention with the protesters, both inside and out of Siemens Hall. And so that makes the matter of managing these types of crowds more complicated than simply kind of going in and arresting people, which was the mission at hand when EPD was first called in. But it's important to note that before EPD even arrived, the decision had been made to arrest those protesters inside of Siemens Hall for trespassing. And soon after, some in the crowd, as you saw in the video, began throwing cans at the law enforcement that had coalesced there at the doorway, trying to break down those barricades. And that really demonstrated some violent intentions for at least some in the crowd, and had the potential to incite others to that similar level of violence, despite what may have been originally depicted as a peaceful protest. And then the decision was made that the crowd as a whole was what is called an unlawful assembly. So everybody that was in that particular space was determined to be part of now an unlawful assembly. But again, important to note, EPD itself, the members that showed up to the scene, did not play a role in that decision-making process. The decision was made by university administrators, by the university police department, and I'll acknowledge that the leadership there has changed since this particular point in time. But the decision-making from that crowd management perspective was outside the span of control of the team from EPD that arrived. And so when we're looking at crowd management generally, once those determinations are made that we're going to begin arresting, that this is an unlawful assembly, the actions of law enforcement then are governed by use of force policies. Certainly there are some more recent restrictions and limitations on what types of force might be used on crowds generally. So if we're talking about the crowd as one entity, there are limitations now with state law that have come out since 2020. But what we saw in the particular videos and in these uses of force by specific EPD officers were that they were in response to specific subject behaviors. And so we're talking really about the use of the baton that was used in methods to both push and thrust and strike various specific protesters who were displaying some active aggressive behaviors. And then we also observed, as we write in our incident summary, a number of physical uses of force that would be used by the officer's own body. Again, were used in response to specific protesters and the activities that were being displayed by those specific protesters. And so as Julie said, really what we found in our deep dive of all the video was that the EPD officer response from a force perspective and a crowd management perspective was measured and appropriate given the threats that were presented right at the start of that incident in their response. But certainly one of the questions then is, look, if this is the crowd that you're facing, if this is the situation that you're facing, why were you even there to begin with? Why were the officers staged at those front doors of Siemens Hall? And again, excellent question to ponder and to look at. The evidence that we received suggested that the incident from the onset lacked effective planning and command and control. And so we call that operational planning deficient in our particular report. There was a potential plan. The officers were briefed when they first arrived onto the scene, but again, that plan was let's move the barricades from Siemens Hall and let's go in and arrest this group of 40 or so protesters who are peacefully congregating and trespassing now in the building. In all of that, however, there was no clear incident command. There was really, in our review, no risk assessment. What were the costs and benefits of having a law enforcement intervention at this point? There was no contingency planning in place if the circumstances changed from point A to point B. So we're now trying to remove these barricades and we see protesters responding with throwing cans to the officers. There was no real consideration for some operational basics like, hey, did all the entrances to Siemens Hall get blocked off, or are people able to come in and out other doors? Are the officers safe from a tactical perspective, or are there protesters both in front and behind them? So those are these types of planning and command structures that were just regrettably lacking that day. And the EPD officers who responded, again, as Chief Stevens noted, the only ones with the appropriate gear to do crowd management, the riot helmets and their shields, were really just at the front line of something that was a flawed mission to begin with. And they attempted to execute a mission that they had been tasked with. Really, at the end of the day, when we take a step back, we look at this, and had that command and control been in place, had the planning been in place, we didn't see an immediate threat beyond vandalism, some disorder in Seaman Hall, that would have really required a law enforcement intervention at that particular point in time. But this all was disadvantaged by the absence of that plan. And a third component that we talk about in detail in the report, and that Chief Stevens also touched upon, is this idea of mutual aid. And certainly, as he mentioned, it is a critical component for law enforcement generally, but specifically in a region like yours, where the agencies are traditionally smaller and they really need to come together to help each other out in these times. The concept of that, showing up and helping each other, is a very simple one. And certainly one that you can see the chief's passion and commitment for. But the execution of that can become really complicated. And we saw that on April 22nd. When, again, we step back to this kind of macro level, we see that there was no real previously established plan for mutual aid response to crowd management. So one of the things we might expect to see, for example, is there a memorandum of understanding between these agencies that defines when we show up, what are we expected to do? How do we show up? Who's in control? What types of vulnerabilities and liabilities might be in place as we respond to mutual aid? And that just wasn't established kind of at the macro level before April 22nd even began. We found, of course, EPD to be a leader in this space. And we are hopeful that this incident and our recommendations move toward the county and the region having these types of agreements, these types of training together, where they might be able to establish that kind of level setting, so that in the future, when mutual aid is requested for crowd management, everyone has a clearer understanding of who's doing what in that scene and how this should all play out. And that even takes a more important level when we're talking about First Amendment assembly responses, because we want to be very sensitive and realistic about what it means when law enforcement intervenes in these types of situations, and certainly on the university campus as well. What does university leadership understand that the outcome will be if they request a law enforcement intervention? All of that has to be level set before these events play out. And finally, going forward, as the chief mentioned, and as we have discussed in the past related to critical incidents, we really like to see these holistic reviews. This is a chance and an opportunity for lessons to be learned and for the incident to play out in a different way in subsequent incidents. We already saw that happen April 30th, the May 11th commencement ceremonies. Internally, the chief has expressed to us that there have been a lot of debriefs and discussions and lessons learned within the department. And the chief and county leaders and regional leaders have discussed convening this type of debrief on that regional level. We're hopeful that that might result in the kind of planning and agreements that we're talking about here in this report. And we certainly know that EPD is a leader in that particular movement forward. And then finally, a piece that we saw and we recommended was that EPD refresh its mobile field force training. Mobile field force is kind of the concept that embraces crowd management and how officers should tactically respond. It's a field that's continually evolving. And EPD has already committed to sending several officers and supervisors to a regional training center in Alabama. They will come back with new knowledge and train the rest of the department. I want to be sure it's understood that there was no tactical deficiencies that training would have fixed in this case. But because it's continually evolving and always something new to learn, we wanted to see the department really refresh that training for its officers. We've thrown a lot at you. You've seen some pretty striking video, and obviously there's a lot to unpack here. Reminder that our scope was really to focus on the Eureka Police Department. There are certainly some larger issues and questions to be had, force that was used by other agencies. All of that was outside of our particular scope. But we welcome questions, comments, anything that we can help to clarify with respect to this incident.
And we have them. So thank you, Independent Auditor Julie and Teresa. So for your report, this is just a very detailed report, and I really appreciate it. Now I just wanted to address to the board is that I know we all have questions to the board, and my recommendation to the six of us here is that just be cognizant of how much time you're taking, and just realize that I will give you an opportunity to ask all your questions. But if you feel like if I feel like you've been asking too many questions, I'm gonna ask another person to ask questions. I just want to be fair with everyone. So who would like to go first? All right, Board Member Giventer.
Thank you very much. First observation. I was at the Board of Supervisors meeting this morning, and I really want to compliment and welcome Supervisors Madrona and Arroyo, who are in attendance today listening to what's going on, because what was presented to the Board of Supervisors was a recent report by the Humboldt County Civil Grand Jury, which recommended to the Board of Supervisors that a similar type of a review process, similar to the COPP and the OIR group that we have here in Eureka, be adopted for Humboldt County, in particular because of the close liaison that the city of Eureka has with the Humboldt County Sheriff's Department. And I think this is a absolutely wonderful example, I hope, to our supervisors of what can be accomplished at the county level. In particular, I want to bring to the Board of Supervisors and our attention that there does not seem to be a formal mutual aid agreement among our law enforcement agencies in this county, so that we know when we're called upon to help one another, who's in charge, what is the incident command, what is the protocol for involvement and response. As noted in the report, over time, senior management from multiple agencies calmed the situation down at Cal Poly and developed an appropriate response and course of action. But in the heat of the moment on April 22nd, there was insufficient command and control, and that needs to be addressed. My question to the OIR group is, do you have some examples that you can bring to our attention of workable mutual aid agreements at a county level?
Yeah, certainly we worked, one of the areas that we also monitor is the Santa Monica Police Department. They're part of a regional mutual aid response down here in Southern California. And it's not an uncommon practice to have these types of agreements. So certainly these would be available not only from our end, but also the chief would be able to access these certainly from different chief associations, chief of police groups, and as well as International Association of Chiefs of Police that have examples of what these might look like.
You also mentioned templates for a response. Maybe you could define that a little bit for me, please.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so one of the kind of factors of command and control is this incident management system, and agencies, including EPD, in fact, and they provided some examples of their types of operational planning that they had for the subsequent events that happened, May 11th and others. These are basically kind of generic incident plans that you can fill in the blanks as you go, but it really establishes the basics of who would be in control, in command, who would be the incident commander, where would you set up the types of logistics and command centers that you might need, what kind of tactical channels via the radio are you looking at to have the appropriate communication between all the stakeholders. And these plans can be developed in advance. There are some very clear factors that are always going to be replicable across situations. Of course, every situation is unique and fluid, so you would want to have the opportunity to have that plan, even if it's generic, be kind of fluid and flexible to fit any particular situation. But those templates are used fairly commonly, and would be something that could be developed in advance so that everyone has a level setting of what it might look like when these things occur.
Okay. Thank you, Dean.
All right. Thank you. Anybody else? Board member Torres?
I just wanted to add that very thorough report. I really appreciate reading it. Very detailed, impressive. Thank you. I just wanted to add to the chief, to the city, that as a former HSU student, I'm embarrassed by that, what happened. And that I highly suggest that for future mutual aid that you give your people the authority to, if they know we're going to get hurt by these dumb decisions, that they have the power to decide themselves to get out. It's not worth it to follow bad decision making when they get to a scene and there it doesn't look like what they were told, or it changes rapidly, and we're just going to follow the rules because we're rule followers. And even if it's a bad decision, it's a decision we're going to follow. And I think with all the training you guys have, it probably clearly overshadows whatever our HSU PD training is. And I think you should tell your people that they can overrule and get themselves out of a situation where they're going to get hurt, where they know following this instruction is going to be bad for them. And so that is my recommendation. Thanks.
Chief Stevens, would you wish to speak regarding that, or?
Made a commitment to the IPA that when available, we will send higher level command staff people to these events so that we don't put that responsibility on a sergeant and on those who are asking to go up there. I will also say, while I don't disagree with you, they need to have the ability to self-reflect and make decisions on their own. When we are already committed to something and there are other people that are relying on us for the safety of the other officers, deputies that were there, that could happen, but it's got to happen in unison, because we don't want to leave our partners standing alone to deal with something that could end up getting them hurt because we're pulling resources back because of the heat of the moment kind of decision. So I absolutely hear what you're saying. I will work harder to make sure that we have a command presence at these events when necessary and appropriate, but also work on allowing them to have a bigger voice too when it comes to these types of circumstances, at least be heard before they do that. But we try to avoid abandoning those that were there to assist after they're already engaged, because that will cause more harm to other agencies and people, and that's just not the way we do business. But I hear what you're saying and appreciate the input.
Thank you. Board member Pardoe, you had your hand raised.
Yes, thank you. A couple comments and then a couple questions. First, it sounded like it was a city council member who suggested this review be done. I commend the city council person and the city manager and chief of police for getting right on this. This incident happened in April, and here we are in July, 3 months later at our first meeting, and we're reviewing it. This is the exact type of incidents that opens up a police department to significant criticism, and the public, I think, when we've seen investigations in the past that drag on and they don't get any information, I think the public just becomes more and more frustrated and angry about that. So I want to commend the city and the city manager and the chief for engaging with the IPA quickly and getting this report out. Because, as I said, I think this allows the public to weigh in, and is the best way to respond to criticism is just being open. Also, I want to commend the IPA for not making this political. Obviously, it was a very political protest, lots of high emotions, lots of strong feelings. And when I read the report, I did not feel like there was a political component to this report. I think the report, as you said, focused on the EPD and their response, and I think that's very important in this type of report. Also, I know the chief feels that he wasn't there, and maybe in a timely fashion, but the chief did show up, and I think being the chief is a very difficult job. You're basically available 24/7, 365 if you're doing your job, and so I commend him for showing up in a very difficult situation and a very rapidly changing situation, because I think it's so critical for our departments, especially in Humboldt, that the chiefs are engaged and on site in these critical incidences. And I do agree with your assessment. I think this was doomed to fail from the very beginning. There was not an urgency, as you said. There was no lives at risk. There was no beyond the vandalism component and the occupying the building component. I think that there wasn't an urgency, and then the lack of planning, I think, was obviously your comment about you're trying to go through the front door while all the back doors are wide open. I mean, it's just that's not going to work in a protest, as I think we all know, and we've seen in these protests. It's very, very hard on the very beginning of these protests for the police, who face a much, much larger number of protesters, to be able to have a successful outcome. And so I guess my questions, following up on Board Member Torres' question, is mutual aid. Obviously mutual aid is critical to any agency. If there's a shooting, if there's a protest, any incident, mutual aid is in a small area like Humboldt. That's the only way you can do it, because we don't have the numbers, and we rely on our other agencies all the time. Could you expound a little more on mutual aid, and when the officers are called upon, do they fall directly under the chief at in this case at Humboldt State? Are they, I think it would be very difficult for them to sort of say, hey, you know what, I don't agree with this plan. That's not what they're there for, and they're called in very quickly. So I would like a little bit more information just on mutual aid and your thought on the sergeant and the officers that showed up. And then I have a question regarding recommendation number 4, the multi-agency debrief to occur, and I assume that would include Humboldt State and the Sheriff's Office, CHP. What are the odds that will actually happen now that we're 3 months out? I'm not aware that it has happened, but do we think that's realistic, or just for the future more of an aspirational recommendation? So 2 questions there. Thank you.
All right. Independent auditor or Chief Stevens, any of you like to answer those questions?
Julie looks ready.
This is the trouble with Zoom, is Teresa and I can't really, we're in different offices, and it's hard to sort of, I have a feeling Teresa's got a lot to say, but I don't want to step on that. But if you want to go ahead, Teresa, go ahead, and then I'll add anything in that I need to add.
All right. Yeah, with respect, I'll start with your second question, because it's one that's easier one to answer, which is, it's my understanding, and Chief Stevens could explain a little more about what's in progress, but that these agencies are already looking at a date sometime in early August to convene and have that type of multi-agency debrief. I really commend the chief and the other agencies for seeing the need for that, for really moving pretty quickly to make that happen. And I'll of course let Chief Stevens speak more to that, because it's something that he is more actively engaged in.
Yeah, like Teresa said, the debrief is scheduled. It was presented by Cal Poly Humboldt. They've called the debrief themselves. They have a new chief, and they're looking at preparing for school to be back in session and the potential of additional things happening within our society and nation over the next few months until the end of the year. So it will happen at the beginning of August. The date and time has been set, and it will be all the agencies, head agencies that were there during the April 22nd or the following April 30th acts at the school.
Great. Thank you, Chief, for that update.
All right.
Yeah, and to your first question with respect to mutual aid, as I mentioned, it is something that's simple in concept, but tricky to execute. Really, the command structure, incident command, there's a nationwide model that is fairly well accepted on how incident command should work in these mutual aid situations. What it looks like most generally is that the agency that is calling in mutual aid is the agency that's in command. That may or may not be true always. So it might be the case that a more experienced or more tenured personnel commander comes on scene, and that individual is tasked with the incident command for the operation. But certainly, it is challenging, and we would not have the expectation of a sergeant and 4 officers coming onto the scene to take any sort of incident command beyond that supervisor managing the officers who are under his or her direct command. What we did notice in watching, I watched the entirety of that particular supervisor's body-worn camera footage. There were numerous occasions when that supervisor looked around, went to other personnel and said to the effect of, what exactly is our mission here? What are we doing here? It was that supervisor who brought forward the idea that there may be other doors that protesters were using to go in and out. Were those doors secured? So from a very formal command structure situation, that supervisor did not have the authority, nor would we expect him to have the authority to take over incident command. But that supervisor did voice concerns and provide a lot of good input to the situation as it was unfolding. And as I said, it's really kind of a nationally accepted model as to how mutual command and the incident command structure works. And those are all the types of agreements and discussions that are had in advance of these incidents occurring and unfolding. It's really hard to do it in real time if you don't already have a set structure in place. Julie, what did I miss?
I think you covered it.
Great. Thank you, too.
I have a question, and you kind of mentioned that as well. My question is, I know initially the mission was to arrest the protesters, and then it went from allowing for a peaceful gathering. From a public's perspective, I know a lot happened in that video that I saw, that we all saw. And officers were getting pinned and this and that. But from a public's perspective, it appears that what's going on is officers are pushing against protesters. Protesters are pushing back. And there's this tug-of-war effect going on. And there's physical force being used as well. And my question is, what was the mission at that time when all of that was going on? Was it to allow peaceful protests? Was it to try to arrest individuals? I guess I'm just a little bit confused what the purpose was, what the officers were trying to do there.
Yeah, and Chairperson Novello, it's exactly as you are describing here. When you watch that video, you are really left wondering, what is it that everyone is hoping to accomplish here? You have two groups that are pushing physically against each other, and it really is not clear what either group is really going to accomplish at the end of this push and shove tug of war, as you said. Our understanding, and the EPD officer and supervisor's understanding at that point in time, was first, we're going in to Siemens Hall to arrest protesters who are trespassing in the building. That was the request from university administrators. That was the request that went out via mutual aid. In very short order, and we're talking a matter of minutes, if not seconds, the attempts to remove the barricades, the furniture that you saw there in the doorway, was met with cans being lobbed across. And the EPD officers, being the only ones with the shields available, were called to the front. In essence, to at first protect deputies and others who were trying to move that furniture out of the way so that they could access the hall. But it really then became this muddied set of circumstances where the mission was both, let's get in here and arrest people, and also let's protect our fellow deputies who are being assaulted by these cans thrown across the line. And then also, unclear, push into the hall in some meaningful way to be able to pull out people who were displaying violent intentions at that time, to allow the peaceful individuals to continue to engage, perhaps. But again, all of that became very muddied in a matter of seconds, to your point. And it really did turn into this tug of war that was unclear. But I think what's important to note is that in the tug of war, we saw an officer go down. We saw protesters engaging in ways, at least some, that were aggressive against officers, and that the officers responded in the way that is appropriate given their use of force policies and guidelines. And so I don't want to miss that.
Yeah. And I just want to back up to the very beginning of it. And we are, again, our job here was to look at the EPD response. And so we don't know, we are not privy to any of the records, the communications that happened between the UPD chief and university administration. We don't know. But I will just say communication is really, really critical here when you're talking about what is the mission, what are the expectations. And so just sort of hypothetically, I would say, if there were a similar situation in your city and protesters were occupying a library, for example, and your city manager said to your police chief, I want you to arrest people. They're vandalizing our library. I would like the police department to clear those protesters out and arrest them for vandalism. What I would expect, and I'm not speculating, I have no idea what kind of communications happened between, it happened at the university administration level. So I'm just saying, in a sort of, ideal world environment, what I would expect Chief Stevens to do is to say to your city manager, okay, but you need to understand this is what that might look like. In order to get those people out of the library, we might need to use force. That's going to be captured on video. It might, often those videos don't look good. To have that sort of back and forth communication, what are you really after? Are there different ways we could go about accomplishing that? And to have that level of communication is what I would expect between the sort of, the administration in charge and the police chief and the police leadership. And so again, I'm not suggesting that didn't happen here. I don't know. Just, the question was, what was the mission? And so I do think that communication piece is really critical, and something to not get, we don't want to leave that behind just at least in that hypothetical world.
Yeah, and I completely agree. It seems like there should have been better communication from what's happening in the front lines up to through the incident command system. So, I'm looking over here. So, have any other questions? Okay, board member Latica.
Yeah, I just want to commend the amazing detail of this report to the extent that, and I think it's available on the city website if I'm not wrong. So any public member of the public who wants to read it can go and read this. I think it's a 29-page report. You go into the detail of like individual jabs by a baton, individual fists thrown by an officer, and evaluate the justifications. And I think the finding of your report was that you found all use of force to be justified. Is that correct? Okay. And I also wanted to highlight what Dr. Pardoe mentioned, was that the origin of this report was not any complaints by the public or anybody who was involved in that attempt to clear the protests. This was from a city councilman's request, a city council person's request. So I think that is also very commendable. I did want to see if you had reached out to any of the protesters in an effort to see if they had individual footage or had any first-person account that could shed a different perspective, or to evaluate their injuries, if any.
Yeah, that's a terrific question. We wanted to be mindful of our scope in this particular response. What we've done in the past with other larger scoped projects is to reach out and to request that anyone who may have had firsthand experience come forward and provide their narrative, provide their own video footage. In this case, we did not do that explicitly. One, because of the time frame of this, we wanted to turn it around quickly. But two, because in part we were able to find, for better or worse, social media is very transparent. So we were able to find quite a lot of firsthand footage. We are grateful that there were some media personnel, both inside and out, who were live streaming and provided that footage. And then I was also able to find footage of some individuals who had posted to their social media pages, and was able to review those points of view. We did note that there was injury to at least one protester. That injury was captured via the media footage. It is unclear how that protester was injured, but certainly want to acknowledge that is something that occurred. To our knowledge, and to the city's knowledge at this point, that individual has not filed a claim for their injuries. And again, unclear how that injury was sustained, but that did occur, and it was documented in one of the live streams.
And then my last question, I think, is you had mentioned changes to the law following the George Floyd protests in 2020. Do you think those changes, or maybe it was just changes to rules of engagement, do you think they sort of tempered how this played out? Would it have maybe gotten more out of control had the prior rules been in place?
It's an excellent question. Most of those laws were limitations on the way that law enforcement could engage with crowds as a whole, and a lot of them had to do most explicitly with the use of chemical agents, so tear gas and other components that might impact a crowd in its entirety, the use of kinetic impact weapons that might strike individuals who were not actively aggressive and who were peacefully protesting. And I don't see that either one of those tools was brought to the table or considered in this particular incident, rightly so. And so I don't know that those new restrictions and limitations have an impact here. Perhaps, however, those types of limitations and new policy developments have an impact on how officers are able to respond or how specialty units are called in. But in this case, I don't believe that there was a consideration to use tear gas on that crowd or other chemical agents.
Thank you.
Board Member Chair Bellini.
Well, that's getting better.
All right.
Thank you. Hey, first off, I would like to join the rest of my board members and thank you and the whole team over at the ORI group. You did an excellent job outlining all the incidents in which the EPD officers were involved in, which just isolating that part of it must have been a tremendous job, and digging through all the videos and officer number 1, number 2, number 3. Yeah, so I commend you for doing a great job there. And I also wanted to thank Supervisors Madrone and Arroyo for being here today. I know the county is thinking about going this direction. I think it's great that you came to see what we do here, and I appreciate that. And I appreciate the new chief, HSU Chief Greg Allen, being here and seeing what we do. And hearing about some of the shortcomings of the operation. I'm sure you're very interested, and I'm really glad to hear that there's a after-action debriefing coming up. It is surely needed, but it raises a whole bunch of questions about the whole incident in general that I know is not our concern here, but my particular interest was, and I know, Chief, you were saying, geez, I wish I had been there. I wish there was more command staff there, but you can't beat yourself up over that. But at some point, my question is, at some point, did you actually assume the incident command position? Like the report says you were the default IC, but what happened there?
Yeah, that was one of the reasons why it's tough to go on a mutual aid call as a chief, because you don't want to become chief heavy and step on someone else's jurisdictional control of their incident. But when I got there, I will just say that it was a combined effort with the heads of a couple different agencies, including Cal Poly, that began to make decisions based on the facts that we had at the time and as things were transpiring directly in front of us. So it was a combined effort between myself, CHP's captain, the former chief of Cal Poly, and then a sergeant from the SO who was in charge of their unit there to make the final decisions and how we acted and contingency plans and what our final outcome was going to be for the evening. It was a group decision.
So, okay. So it was at that point when you retreated and then came together and talked about what to do for the rest of the night and the next day.
Well, we vacated. We didn't retreat.
I'm sorry.
But no, I mean, that was, it kind of went, we went different ways at that point because we had people now protesting at the jail within the city. So we had to get back to the city to make sure that remained peaceful. Mm-hmm. In the following days after that, again, our role was collateral and that we were asked to make reaction teams and assist when needed. I attended the briefing for the April 30th at Blue Lake and was available to answer any questions they had or what our response was, but that was being run by echelons of OES teams that were up here from the Bay Area under Cal Poly's oversight and taking part in that, but each team broke out to do their own thing at that point, and we went back to the city to handle what we needed to do.
Oh, okay.
So,
I see. So was it EPD that negotiated with the protesters to be able to remain on campus and patrol during the night?
We were just asked to provide bodies over the days that came after that to help maintain the closure of the campus, and we just provided bodies to assist with that. But that, again, was run by Cal Poly, and they put in a different They provided the different resources or asked for additional resources to help set up that command structure for those days following that closure and to deal with issues that were arising on campus.
I see. Okay. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of tough decisions having to be made right at, you know, that's what we do. We make those decisions right at the moment they happen, a lot of times. Yeah, again, I just like to thank the city staff for having the IPA look into this and allowing us to take a look at it and comment. I think there's going to be a lot better outcomes in the future because of it. So thank you again.
Any other questions? Yes, Board Member Torres.
Sorry, this has been bothering me since the beginning. I just finally have to say it. As a untrained, not professional like the chief and his peeps, from a citizen standpoint, I look at that and I'm like, when's the pepper spray coming out? Because that's what I would have thought. Pepper spray those guys. And I'm just wondering, had that happened, based on what you know, would you have said that met whatever the policies that the EPD has? Or would you have said, no, they shouldn't have done that? Just because, like I said, as your local citizen, that would have been my thought, like, spray them. So I'm just curious, had that happened, what have you thought about, like, what have been your response if that did happen? Thanks.
Yeah, so we've dealt a lot in hypotheticals and what, you know, what could have been done differently. You know, I hesitate to say because I am not seeing where, you know, I like to evaluate the evidence that's actually before us. But to entertain a hypothetical, I think the use of pepper spray, of course, has its own drawbacks. It's going to affect more than the individual that is engaged in assaultive behavior. The use of the baton, which is a commensurate level of force in force policy, really focuses on one particular individual. Pepper spray is going to have an impact across the crowd. Pepper spray also sometimes has the very unfortunate unintended consequence of coming back into officers. So it compromises the already compromised officers who are there. You know, at times it seems like it would be a great tool to use, but it does have significant drawbacks. Whether or not it would have been appropriate, I hesitate to say, but certainly it's a tool that in and of itself impacts sort of in a disproportionate and unfortunate way the officers as well as others who might not be engaged in assaultive behaviors.
Okay. Any other questions? Yes, Board Member Latica.
Thank you. Found my other set of questions. Do you know if once EPD arrived, was there any effort to try to establish communication with the protesters inside?
So Julie mentioned this, you know, a few minutes ago. We did not have the opportunity to view kind of the whole scope of communication that was happening, whether that was interagency or agencies outward to the protesters or the protest organizers. Our understanding, just strictly based on body-worn camera footage that we observed, there was not any immediate attempt to communicate with the protesters. There was, as we mentioned in our incident summary, 2 dispersal orders given. Dispersal orders are typically communicated via a loudspeaker or megaphone. One of them was communicated to the crowd outside Seaman Hall to inform those individuals that they should leave the area or might be subject to use of force. The other was issued right at the entrance to Seaman Hall. It was done just in plain voice, deputy yelling that particular dispersal order. We're not sure who heard it or who didn't. As you heard on that video, it was very loud. And so whether or not protesters actually heard that dispersal order is unclear to us. But those were the attempts to communicate as far as we were able to see from the evidence. Certainly there could have been other attempts happening that we were not aware of, just on the scope of our particular review, perhaps between university and protesters, or the university police and protesters. We did not see those.
Chief Stevens?
Yeah, I can add to that a bit. There were at least a couple times after that initial conflict happened at the front doors where administrative staff were engaged inside Siemens Hall with those that were occupying the building, trying to come up with a resolution, trying different tactics to make this resolve itself without any further conflict. And the last one is right at the point where we decided to vacate. They wanted to give it one last chance to come up with a peaceful resolution to get their building back, and when that failed, at that point, we realized we were compromised for the rest of the evening. They weren't going to leave, and our mission changed. So, yeah, there were attempts by administrative staff to do that.
Okay, thank you.
I have two questions. One is the footage that we received. We received footage from one entry of Siemens Hall, but we all know that I believe there's 4 entries in Siemens Hall. And I know we're not here to talk about the other departments as well. My question is, earlier it was mentioned that 20 officers were deployed to the scene, and in the video we probably saw like a handful of them. So where were the other officers placed during the incident?
Yeah, so the initial response was that initial sergeant and 4. There was probably 15, 18 of the 20 that eventually showed up as the additional resources. We were in between. We were at the front doors of Siemens Hall. Just we didn't show you videos that lasted all night long, but we were standing between the crowd, both inside. There were the protesters inside and the demonstrators outside. We did have a couple people, I believe, who were assisting on one of the side doors with another agency. But for the most part, the EPT contingent was standing the line right at the front of Siemens Hall throughout the evening until we decided to vacate.
Okay, thank you. And you could stay up there, actually. My next question is towards you. My next question is, something like this is pretty traumatic for even for police officers, that they're, that they need to maintain their cool and just put on just act in a very calm way. But we all know that something like this definitely impacts officers, and there's been officers that in other departments that has led to other behaviors. So my question is, for the department, for those officers who've been involved in this situation, has behavioral health been offered to these officers even during the debriefing period and afterwards? So,
yeah, so we are very fortunate that the city helps us fund a very robust mental health program within our own agency. We started up here with Restoration Family Services and turned into they're now a law enforcement, primarily focuses on law enforcement. They have opened an office in Humboldt County because now almost every agency in Humboldt County has signed on for their services. So we have a yearly contract, or actually a 3-year contract with them right now. There's 135 sessions that are paid for that you can go to. You don't need approval to go to. You make phone call and they'll set up the sessions. We also do mandatory 30-minute debriefs with a clinician every year that the officers and all employees have to go to. We don't just keep it just to the officers, but dispatchers, records personnel, everyone goes to. So I know through the information that I received back from Restoration and from our head clinician that our services are being used robustly for a multitude of reasons, and we have a very aggressive peer support team that looks after each other. So I feel that we have the necessary tools in place to take care of our people after an incident like this. It didn't rise to the level of having a critical incident debrief where we got those together with a clinician to sit and talk about what happened, but we did individual debriefs afterwards, and then they have that resource available to them 24/7 to make phone calls to and begin that process to receive assistance.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions from the board?
Since we have a little time,
Yes, go ahead, Board Member Latica.
I have one more comment. So a footnote on page 10, number 17, I just wanted to read a part of it. It says, when non-EPD officers pulled a protester who had jumped onto the pickup truck off the truck and took him to the ground, several other officers, also non-EPD, approached to assist. But seeing that enough officers were attending to the situation, the EPD supervisor yelled no, and those additional officers backed off. So as far as commending officers for professionalism and showing restraint, I think that's another situation where I hope you guys can recognize that individual. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? So for the sake of order, what I'm going to do is go to public comments, and then we will take a short 5-minute bio break. So now it's the time for any members of the public to make comments on this agenda item. So I'm going to first look to the chamber to see if there's anybody, and I see Supervisor Madrone coming up. So
thank you. And again, I want to make it very clear, I'm here speaking as an individual, not as a board member. I'm not representing the county or my district or my constituents. I'm just here as an individual. Again, I applaud you for this process that you have. And I also want to applaud Chief Stevens and law enforcement, both at HSU, Eureka, and our deputies. They all work under extremely difficult conditions. I think we all know that. It's not an easy job, and it's getting harder to do. And there's less and less people stepping up to do it, which is not good for us as a society. So I want to recognize that. I'm a Cal Poly alumni 2 times, my bachelor's and master's. I have a lot of affinity with Cal Poly, and started out Humboldt State College, Humboldt University, and now it's Cal Poly. I think CLRBs or COPs or any of these review processes are a good thing. All the data suggests that it absolutely is a wonderful way to increase trust in the process and in our law enforcement. It's not meant to be punitive. It's meant to be a way to try and improve. I make mistakes all the time, and I think we all know that it's good to be able to make improvements. As far as mutual aid, there's some really great examples here in Humboldt County with the fire services. All of our volunteer fire departments and CAL FIRE and the Forest Service, we have these mutual aid agreements. In fact, on the Hill Fire, 6,000 acres south of Willow Creek, they get into joint command when it's close to a state responsibility area, like up by Horse Mountain with Sierra Pacific and Green Diamond Lands nearby. And so they have annual mutual aid agreements that they sign and they work on, and they have a very strong incident command system that is very rigorous in how they respond to fires and incidents and all that. So there's some great examples there. I thought in the report, the idea of having incident plan templates is a fantastic idea. That, yeah, you got to tweak them a little bit, but if you've got the template there, you're 90% towards what you're going to need when these incidents happen. I also appreciate that EPD was not directly involved in the final clearing out of the hall because there was incidents there as well, but it wasn't what you're here to review today. There are issues with how the media was handled and other things, but that's probably more in my bailiwick under my other role. This idea of de-escalation techniques is a really critical one. And I think we all know that when you show up with riot gear and batons, the outcome is fairly predictable, actually. I remember just a year and a half or so ago, my time's going to run out, we had the sheriff talking about de-escalation techniques, and they start out with a baton and taser and then a beanbag. Those are all escalation techniques. De-escalation is talking and listening. And I think the full responsibility falls on HSU, Cal Poly, to have sat down and tried to resolve this before the batons and the riot gear showed up. I think that's where the opportunity was available to really de-escalate. Sacramento State and other universities were able to avoid violence and problems by doing that.
Thank you.
Especially because there was no urgent
Thank
threat.
you, Mr. Madrone.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
All right. Do we have any other public comment in chamber? Seeing none, do we have any public comment in Zoom?
Janelle?
Yes, thank you. This is an interesting topic. When I was in college, way back when, I was part of a protest in Siemens Hall. They were going to eliminate the Native American Studies program, and they were protesting, setting in the office of the chancellor, or the main administrator's office. And but I went when I wasn't in class, and everybody left when it was time to leave and came back the next morning. It worked out. There was finally a meeting. I was at part of that meeting, and it came out successfully. So I think it's incumbent on all parties in this to act with restraint and some consideration of others. I also have some, pretty interesting stories involving individual officers, but those are individual officers, and this process of dealing with these, I commend you for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any others on Zoom?
I see no others.
Okay. Well, thank you for being part of this conversation. It was really interesting to hear all the details. So I call for recess. It is it's 5:27 right now, and I ask everybody to come back here in chamber at 5:35. All right. I think we're all ready to continue. All right, let's go ahead and begin. All right, thank you all for coming back. 5 minutes goes by quick. So our next item on our agenda is the Eureka Police Department complaint log, July 2024, the OIR group. So either independent auditor Teresa Magula or Julie Rulin, would you like to share on this item?
Yeah, so essentially what's before you in that complaint log is what we present every quarter in coordination with EPD. We track and provide you with the status of all incoming complaints across time from the start of our engagement. And as was raised earlier, you'll see that in the recent year, there's been a record number of complaints, which we find to be part of the process and showing that the process is working and effective. So we're pleased to see that. And in the coming quarters, you'll be seeing more closed cases come across in those quarterly reports.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the board? No? Go ahead, Board Member Torres.
Sorry, I was just thinking about this. I was wondering, has there been any thought about comparing the number of complaints we might see in our community, in our city, compared to other same-sized cities? Like where, maybe not necessarily where we stand, but like what may be the average, or are there comparisons? Is there data to compare with just to see where we might stand compared to other cities across either the state or the country? I'm curious.
Yeah, certainly. I think we could comment on other jurisdictions where we play a same role, and the number of complaints is very commensurate. So we're seeing that this is a number that doesn't raise eyebrows, and in fact is one that we're very pleased to see. Not all agencies report out publicly on the complaints that they are receiving or investigating, but certainly EPD does, and just commenting from other agencies that we oversee, this is very much aligned as far as a complaint count.
And I just wanted to add to that, I think Teresa mentioned this, but just to really put a very fine point on it, sometimes seeing a lot of complaints is actually a sign of a healthy process, right? If you go into a place and nobody in the public is making a complaint, that could be because everybody's so thrilled with their agency, but more often than not, it's because people don't have any kind of faith in the process, and so they don't bother to make a complaint. So when we see complaints being made and there's, interaction with the agency and a robust investigation into that complaint, I think sometimes that drives more complaints because there's a satisfaction that if I make this complaint, it's going to be heard. Somebody's going to pay attention to it. And so, more complaints is not necessarily a bad thing in our view and in our experience.
Okay. Yes, Board Member Giventer.
I see in the report there are about a dozen complaints that are in progress. My question to OIR is are you guys okay with handling that number? Is that too many for your ability to
Are you trying to get them paid more?
Very much appreciate that consideration, Board Member Giventer. We are very prepared to take a look at all of those as they become closed cases, and we welcome that opportunity to review those cases. But thank you for raising that consideration.
You'll let us know when the volume is too much?
Absolutely. We will come to you, sir.
Thank you. Yeah, and I would like to follow up that. Yeah, I'm noticing that some of these were getting close to about a year since the complaint was made, and my question is, would we be able to see these by our next COPP meeting, which will be in October?
Yeah, and thank you for that question, Chair Novello. Certainly, we have at least one that's coming up or two that are coming up here in August to their year. We have been in communication with the department. They are actively working to close those and finish those off, and you will be seeing those in the next quarterly report.
Excellent. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none. Any public comments? I see no one in chamber. How about in Zoom?
Janelle?
I have some concerns about a case that you closed, and I'm wondering how to handle that. I will tell you what, I'm going to just put out a suggestion of what I'm thinking about doing, and that is to resubmit it with information that you never received, that I believe you never received. Is that an approach that?
Janelle, you can this is City Manager Miles Slattery. You can contact me, and yes, we can discuss that. I don't see that being an issue.
Okay, but I need to contact you and discuss it with you first. Is that what you're saying?
You can contact me. You can contact the OIR group. You can contact Chief Stevens. All of those are an avenue for you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Janelle. Any other public comments in Zoom?
I see no one else.
Okay. Thank you for that. So the next item on our agenda is Eureka Police Department recommendation log for July 2024. I'll put that back to the IPA group to share.
Yeah, and so what you see in this is a log tracking all of the recommendations that we have made across various reports since the start of our engagement. You'll see that many of them are in progress. They have been accepted by the department. In particular, ones that relate to policy changes and updates, those take a little more time just given the fact that policy changes and updates have a whole process that they have to go through. But certainly we have been I'm very pleased with the department's overall response to accepting the majority of the recommendations that we've made. The new ones on this log relate to those that were presented just today in the Cal Poly report. And as we noted during our presentation, a number of those are already in progress. And certainly the chief is committed to moving some of these forward in a very fast process.
All right. Any questions regarding this agenda item? No? I just want to make a comment that I just think it's great seeing all of the recommendations on sheets of paper. So it just shows the work that the OIR group has been doing. So thank you for that. So if there's no questions or any other questions or comments from the board, I'll put it back for any questions from the general public. Here in chamber, there are none. Is there any public comments on Zoom?
Anyone on Zoom that would like to comment? I see none.
Okay. Well, thank you. The next item on our agenda is board member reports. Do any board member have any report outs to make? Yes, board member Giventer.
Just for the record, I have served on the Humboldt County Civil Grand Jury in the 22-23 year and in the 23-24 year. That term of service expired on the last day of June of this year. I did have a heavy hand in writing the first report of the civil grand jury that dealt with a recommendation that there be sheriff's oversight. It did cite, possibly at my suggestion, that a model for the county would be what we're doing here in the city of Eureka. I also want to point out that soon after that report was published by the civil grand jury, the North Coast Journal, Thaddeus Greenson, did have an opportunity to interview Chief Stevens and quoted Chief Stevens as saying, if there's going to be oversight, then he complimented the COPP model. He says that oversight board provides a valuable conduit for getting information both to and from the community, fostering improved communication between the department and those it polices. I do think that we're doing good work here, and we will continue to do so. The experience that we had today with working with OIR, I think, provides an excellent model for what should be done countywide. Thanks.
Thank you, board member Giventer. Do we have any other board member reports? Yes, board member Pardoe.
Question and maybe a request for review. The first question I have is our bylaws, and I don't know if we need a formal agenda item. Recommend that we have an annual report as well as a to the city manager and the council on the effectiveness of the IPA, and also an annual report at the city council meeting. So I guess my question is, does this need a formal agenda item, and would October be the time to discuss that?
So yes, we received board member Pardoe's email regarding this. Staff is going to work on some sort of parameters or guidelines for that evaluation, and we'll bring it back for the October meeting for that to be considered by the board. And then we will likely, you guys can do your report, create a subcommittee, whatever you guys want to do in order to do so. And then you can provide that report to me, and then we will provide an opportunity either at the end of the year or sometime at the beginning of 2025 for a report to council.
Great, thank you. And the second comment is it seems like, and I believe this is under the purview of the Eureka Police Department, that parking enforcement has increased. And so I didn't know if that was something that we would discuss at this meeting.
So we made a decision when we brought back. So we changed our regulations, changed our timeframes. We're going to be implementing a pilot project for QR codes for our parking lots for meters, and those coming up in the near future. Not unfortunately, but fortunately, that's moved on to code enforcement, which is a part of code enforcement and not under. I mean, we had the assistance of EPD because that's where traffic enforcement was prior to that, but now it's currently under code enforcement. But if the board would like a report or anything like that, we can have them provide one.
No, I just wanted clarification. That's helpful. Thank you.
All right. Any other board member reports? I know for me, we have an empty seat here. This morning, we did receive a letter of resignation from one of our board members, Kimberly Wiley, and so tonight I would like to recognize now former board member Wiley for her time and just thank her for her time and her efforts and the work that she did on this board. So it was great for me just sitting next to her and having that. And so, yeah, with that, I would like to make a plug for the public, whether you're watching it now or whether you're watching this a couple of days from now. If you would like to fill our seat, we welcome anyone who I believe they live in the city of Eureka to fill in that seat. Go to the City of Eureka website and fill out the application. And, we would love to have a full group up here. So. Anybody else? Yes, Board Member Torres.
I'm just hoping that somebody informs the county that we are not available for their board because we're on this board.
I second that. Any other reports? Okay, so now I would like to. Now it's for the next agenda item is staff reports. So I would like to let Chief Stevens ask to see if you have a report for us.
Again, good afternoon, everyone. I was just going to touch on, I want to answer a couple questions that were brought up earlier, and then just touch on the staffing at EPD. It seems to be what the most concerning part of it is. Shannon, would you mind handing these out to everyone, please? So what you're going to get is an internal document that we create that we were able to post around the department just to keep the employees up to date on where we are with staffing, recruiting, where applicants are in the process. Because I think for them, knowledge, because we don't always get to see each other and talk, and they're not privy to all the information that's going on, because sometimes it changes week to week, because we update this week to week. But this gives them an overview of the process and of our efforts to try to do recruiting and retention. So currently we have 3 recruits in backgrounds. These recruits, if successful, will start the January or late December, January Academy 2023-2024 or 24-25. We do have 3 currently recruits in the Academy that will graduate at the end of the year. We have 1 lateral officer in backgrounds, and his medical is the only piece that's hanging up right now. Once that's done, he'll go to our recertification class in September, which is 3 or 4 weeks long, and he'll be able to come back to patrol to do his FTO program. We currently are down about 3 or 8 positions. We have 3 people in the FTO program right now, 1 lateral from the Humboldt County Sheriff's Department, and then 2 new officers that just graduated the academy about a month ago. We're down 1 position or 3 position in dispatch. We have 1 in backgrounds. I believe there's a second one that's getting ready to start the background process. We're still down 1 position in records. We just started that recruitment. We have an administrative tech that's going to start in our investigation unit on August 1st, and that'll fulfill our admin tech positions we have within the department. We have 1 opening at the community service officer, and we have 1 applicant in backgrounds for that. We're still down a full-time employee in property. However, we're close to hiring a regular part-time employee to fill that role for a period of time for some on-the-job training and experience to see if it's truly going to be a good fit or not. And we're really looking forward to that. And then we're down both of our animal control officers right now, both left within about a month of each other. We do have 2 applicants in background process that just started, so it'll still be probably 2.5 months before we're able to see if they're going to be successful and not through the process. So that's kind of our current staffing levels. Just any questions from the board?
Any questions from the board about staffing? Yes, Board Member Pardoe.
Hi, Chief. Obviously, staffing is just a constant stress. How do you deal with that? You know, knowing that you always have staffing stresses, you know, what's your approach to sort of dealing, you know, I mean, obviously we'd love to have a fully staffed department, but knowing that challenges, you know, that very unlikely anywhere in the near future, what's your approach to sort of knowing this is going to be like this and sort of knowing that there's not really an end in sight at this point?
So one, I mean, we've really ramped up our recruitment efforts. So looking at different ways to utilize social media, Facebook, focusing on areas that seem to have a higher turnover rate of or changes in their departments. We got a message the other day, Curry County had some issue with a tax measure or something, and they ended up having to lay off a bunch of people. And I called the sheriff of Curry County and was like, I don't want to insult you, but you okay if I send you a flyer to hang up in your department if any of your deputies want to, you know, stay employed in law enforcement? I don't think we'll get anybody out of that, but it's those kinds of things we look for. How can we take advantage of somebody else's unfortunate circumstances? I really appreciate the city's efforts with the last contract that was signed. The first paychecks came out this month, and I think that the employees really seen a difference and what that's going to be, and I hope that helps the retention piece. We've been relatively successful with our recruiting with the recruits and paying for them to go to the academy, so we're going to be putting that, open that recruitment up again August 1st for the January Academy. While it takes longer to see the fruits of those labors because they have to go to the academy, they have to get off the FTO program, we do find that generally they are more dedicated and committed to the department because we're loyal to them and how we got them on board. So, and then from an employee standpoint, you know, I'm doing one-on-ones with our employees right now, so I hear a lot of, you know, if what's that one thing in the sky if you could grab today and change? It's staffing. They want to do specialty positions. They want to bring back these things that allows them to be cops. So we're talking about different ways of freeing up time for them to allow that to happen. And so I'm trying to put some new programs in place to give them, you know, 4 hours every 2 weeks where you're not tied to the radio. If you want to go run traffic because that's your goal eventually is to be a traffic officer, then go run traffic. You want to go out to the task force and go on search warrants with DTF, and because you want to be a narcotics officer, then I want to afford you that time to do that. We also look at training, you know, training within a department. We may not be able to do it in-house as much as we want to, but I'm trying to send people to the trainings that they want to go to further their career as well. In this stagnant time where patrol seems to be the really beast of us right now, I don't want their careers to become stagnant. So I can still prepare them for the future and give them hope that when these positions come open, they are going to be well prepared for those and be able to fulfill their dreams of making a detective or making an FTO or sergeant. So trying to find ways to keep them motivated, keep them off the radio, keep them away from patrol for a short period of time to reset and allow them to have as much time off as we can.
Yeah, thank you, and I commend you on all those efforts. Thank you.
Excellent. Any other questions for Chief Stevens regarding staffing? Seeing none, is there any other updates for the board?
Yeah, if I could real quick, there was a couple questions asked about body cameras earlier in the presentation. I don't like things left unanswered if I can answer them, so I'm going to do the best I can real quick. In that first investigation, most non-activations of cameras are brought to us by the employee one because they realize that I forgot to turn my camera on, I didn't turn it on soon enough. They bring it to me. We can set time parameters in our system. I can go back and pull that video off the camera. Appreciate their honesty, appreciate their effort. We're human, we make mistakes, and we're able to correct those mistakes. A lot of them are found during the discovery process. So as our discovery evidence technician is creating cases for court, they all realize that an officer on scene potentially didn't have their camera on. We're required to give the body camera of all officers that are on scene to the DA's office, no matter what their involvement was. So again, that's brought to our attention. We deal with it from a supervisory level, and we'll deal with it that way. Tracking is tough unless the complaints come forward or unless we see patterns, and usually it's the sergeant that sees the patterns. But we have tens of thousands of videos, probably over 100,000 videos stored on the cloud right now, and I would need a full-time employee to really sit down and not be fishing for information, not be fishing for violations, but just do an audit of that. So when we do see a pattern of behavior for an employee, we will go back and look at that and see if that is a pattern. When we think about the discipline or what the appropriate action to take when there is a sustained allegation, we look in their file, we talk to their supervisor. Is this an ongoing issue that this employee is having, or is this a one-off, and are we able to correct that? And I think in that second investigation, or in the one where the officer got the sustained violation for not having the camera on, the circumstances change on scene quickly, and went from one objective that he had at a traffic collision scene to being noticed by a witness and getting information. Yeah, we're going to make mistakes like that. Things are going to happen. And it was addressed appropriately with the employee. And the last thing I just want to talk about is the second investigation. There are places and times in our policy that body camera activations, or even for the body camera to be powered on, is not required within the policy. And there are certain things, such as inside the booking room at the jail, the sheriff has requested we turn the cameras off to have our own camera system in there. Inside a courtroom where we may not be involved in an investigation, our investigation, but other things, so the witnesses or the victims may be seen. And inside the hospital sometimes, if we're not dealing with a situation that's violent, potentially violent, or a case that we're actively working, then we try not to automatically record, because there are people in there who are receiving medical treatment who have rights for privacy. So there are times that is, under the policy, allowed to be turned off or allowed not to be activated. That circumstance in that second investigation evolved very quickly, was not initiated by the officers, and their cameras were powered off because they were in a location that they were allowed to have them powered off at, and by the time they came back on, intervention had happened and the thing had stopped. So I'm not trying to make excuses, but there are other things around some of these investigations that are just dynamic, and just wanted to share that with you, that there are certain times that it is authorized to have the cameras off. So, but that's all I have, unless there's any other questions by the board.
Is there any other questions? I guess my question regarding the cameras is there any technology out there that, and I understand that there's certain locations that cameras should be turned off, that need to be turned off, but given what we have in technology, is there any type of technology out there that would automatically turn on the cameras, kind of like what we see in dash cams house, given the certain circumstance that it turns on, whether that's even heart rate, I don't know. I'm just trying to think of what could be out there.
Sure. There's a difference between powering on and then activating the camera to make a recording. So powering on, no, there's no technology. Activating the camera, there are companies that are working on devices that go on your holster or your handgun. So if you draw your handgun, then it's supposed to activate your cameras. I'm finding them to be somewhat unreliable. They're not always activating. Again, it's technology, right? Just as a human can make a mistake, technology can make a mistake. And we're in the process right now negotiating with WatchGuard, Motorola for new cameras. Our cameras are at the end of life. And we discussed that, and they're not seeing the return on that type of investment for that technology right now for the agencies that are purchasing it, over just having the camera turned on and having the ability to go back and do the record after the fact, which has been very useful in a lot of investigations for us, because dynamic situations occur, officers forget to activate the button. However, we can go back and collect the video given the type of cameras we use and the system we use, which has been very beneficial to this department and the city.
So that's what I'd like to make clear to the board, is that while some of these complaints or some of these issues have come up with officers that don't turn it on, that doesn't mean it's not recording. They didn't activate it. Sometimes if we don't get that information soon enough, it goes away, but that doesn't mean that the camera's not on and working.
All right, thank you. Any other questions for Police Chief and his report? All right. What about public comments? I see there's no one in chamber.
We don't need public comments.
We don't. Okay, perfect. Thank you. So next staff report for Chief Miles. Or sorry.
Thank you. You can call me Chief. That's
City
a
Manager.
first. That's definitely a first.
Sorry.
Thank you, Chair Novello, and good afternoon, board members. Just a couple of things. Chair Novello mentioned that we had a vacancy. We have put out a press release. We have 3 vacancies on our boards and commissions right now. Obviously, the community oversight on police practices is one of those. So hopefully the media picks that up. Their information is available online for any of our boards and commissions for folks to apply to. If they have questions about it, they can contact Executive Assistant Fazio or City Clerk Powell about that, and we can walk them through the process. That process includes them applying. Those applications are given to the mayor for consideration. The mayor considers them and makes a recommendation to the council, and then the council approves them. So we pretty much have an ongoing openings list. This one vacancy will be added to that. Once we get enough people interested, we'll take it to the mayor for consideration. That'll go to council. So anybody have anybody in mind, they're more than willing to. You can either live in City of Eureka limits or work in City of Eureka limits and be on the COPP board. So either of those will make you available. A couple other things. To speak to the chief's update on staffing, we have done a lot better. I think the report that we had similar to this last year, there was a lot more vacancies. There's definitely a lot of people in the queue. As the chief discussed, we have people in training right now that'll be coming out, and then we have the people that are in the going to the academy, and then the people that are recruits. So that kind of that process is a lot longer than the hiring people that are not gone through that process, but I would hope that the retention from that process is a lot better. Being a part of the EPD family, understanding what that means, and the commitment from the city to the police department, I think bodes, in my opinion, better for retention in the future. And then one other thing, we talked a lot about de-escalation. I know that you guys are aware. I just want the public that we are very much on the forefront of de-escalation. We have Commander LaFrance and our managing mental health clinician that actually go, across the state and provide trainings for that. And obviously, we train all of our officers in that. As a matter of fact, this week it's not necessarily de-escalation, but de-escalation is a part of it. We have a week-long training that's being hosted and led by Commander LaFrance and our managing mental health clinician Rosen for other law enforcement officers and other people in the field of either mental health or public safety, that they're giving a training at the Wharfinger all week on that. And so we're definitely on the forefront of that, and even statewide when we look at de-escalation and alternative response and those type of things. So that's all I have, unless there's any questions.
Any questions for City Manager Slattery? No? If we don't need public comment for this? All right. Well, thank you everyone for coming and for joining. And this was, we had a lot of good discussions here. So have a good night, and meeting adjourned.